love to read. For as long as I can remember, I always have. In fact, I don't have very many clear memories of my parents or teachers reading to me, because I wanted to read on my own almost as soon as I could. Reading beautiful literature reminds me of the depth of human creativity and the ultimate truths that we can find in poetry and stories. That kind of reading is not always easy or fun, even for literature majors and English teachers, but it is rich and important and good. The same goes for reading nonfiction like theology or memoirs. Those help me to learn and grow as a pastor and a person. Those books aren't the easy beach reads, but they matter. For fun, I tend to prefer genre books like mysteries or fantasy, romances or thrillers. Those are a little simpler, a little easier. Distract from life, escape a little bit. But I have found that over my life that reading scripture is a totally different exercise than any of those. It's an entirely different thing. Reading the Bible is unique unto itself. When we read the scriptures, we're reading in at least 3 different timelines. We are reading what's happening in the story, what's happening when the story is being written, and what's happening now. This is especially important to remember when we read a challenging passage like the gospel we heard today. That's the type of gospel passage that most preachers look at and go, it's time for the intern to preach. I don't have one, so you get me. So we have to wonder when we hear these difficult things about setting family against each other and coming not to bring peace but a sword, and we have to wonder a few things. What is Jesus saying to the people he's talking to in the story? What is Jesus saying through the gospel writer to the original readers of the gospel? And what is Jesus saying to us as we read it 2,000 years later? And I try to couch myself in those questions when I hear Jesus say things that seem to contradict other things that he says. This challenging passage is from Matthew's missionary discourse, and it has something to teach all 3 groups about the cost of following Jesus. Our first question was, what is Jesus saying to the people in the text? In this case, he's talking to the 12 disciples, and he's finally getting down to some nitty-gritty. The missionary discourse is denser, is more challenging than some of the earlier stories. He says the secret things will be made known, that there will be conflict within families, and that these 12 disciples may be in danger of suffering or even death. This is a useful warning for the apostles and a foreshadowing for what is to come. After all, nearly all of them were eventually arrested and died as martyrs. Second, we wonder, what is Jesus saying to the original readers of this gospel? The first ones who might have heard it read aloud. The Gospel of Matthew, which was probably written for a Jewish Christian audience, was likely written between 80 and 90 CE, shortly after the Gospel of Mark was circulating, and shortly after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, all of which were several decades after Jesus' death and resurrection. When we put the text in that historical context, some of what he says makes a little more sense. Already, Jewish families were being divided as Christian converts were being rejected by the synagogues or abandoned by their families. Already, the persecution from the Roman Empire was beginning. The gospel writer may have worded Jesus' teachings in this way to give those early Jewish converts some hope, some comfort, to help them make some kind of meaning out of what was happening to them. reminding them that Jesus warned that the cost of discipleship would be high, that he wanted them to be brave in the midst of persecution, and to remind them that God, who loves them much more than he loves every sparrow in the sky, would always be there to take care of them. Finally, we have to wonder, what is Jesus saying to us, to the church of 2026, to St. Antony's in Silverdale? The theme is certainly the same. The cost of discipleship is high. But I imagine that most of us probably haven't suffered very much because of being Christian. I haven't, not really. I've never been arrested or punished for my faith, never disowned or thrown out or threatened. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing this discipleship thing right, since the cost was going to be high. It should cost us something to follow Jesus. I think sometimes that cost is a bearable one to pay, even rewarding to pay. Following Jesus demands our time, our energy, our money, our love and service to God and our neighbor. These costs can sometimes feel like no sacrifice at all, because the reward we get from doing those things spiritually, emotionally, is so rich. Other times, I think for us modern Christians in this place, the cost is a little more subtle. Following Jesus demands that we love our neighbors as we love ourselves, and this might mean doing things that aren't easy, but that matter. It might mean reading fewer fun fiction books to escape reality, even when reality is what it is. It might mean voting in such a way that doesn't put our own interests first, but rather the interests of the vulnerable and marginalized before our own. It might mean rethinking controversial issues through the lens of loving our neighbor, and maybe coming to some different conclusions about what is right and what is wrong and where the gray is between them. And that's where I think we may run into that family division that Jesus warned about. Many of us in this room already know how it feels to have political division in our own families in these times, which are so polarized. While we may not face arrest or martyrdom because of following Jesus, sometimes we must face the pain of feeling separated from those we love most, because of the moral stances we take, because of our faith. And so we might wonder, why would any of these groups follow Jesus at all? Why would the disciples give up everything to follow him, all the way to, in most cases, their deaths? Why would the earliest Jewish Christians risk rejection from their communities or persecution from the Roman Empire? Why would we in 2026 risk division in our own families or the loss of power and money because of following Jesus? And here I think the answer is the same for all three groups, because it is worth it. Because being a disciple of Jesus means intentionally, consistently trying to be like Jesus. Like the student is like the teacher. And the more that we are like Jesus, the embodiment of God's love for the world, the more those around us will encounter that love. So perhaps that's why Jesus told us to go and make disciples of all nations. Not because of dogma, but because making disciples means making more and more people who are trying to be like Jesus more and more of the time. And if more and more people in the world were trying to be like Jesus in how they acted, how they treat one another, how they voted, how they spent their money, how they gave of their time, how they loved their neighbors, just imagine how much better our world could be. Does that sound worth it to you?